Let's do it with a little more zest and intention.
Welcome into the D3 Datacast. We're fresh off of the opening weekend of games. We've got a lot of weekends to go, but it was an exciting weekend. Great to see the teams back out on the court. How you doing, Matt? How you feeling about this opening weekend?
It feels like we wait for like September school starts. In October, we hear about teams practicing. We're just like waiting for those tastes of games. And then a fire hose opens up on Friday night, and you've got a bunch of streams at once. You're trying to watch. I tried to do a quad box on an alternate monitor with a game on the main monitor. I think that just doesn't really work for basketball. There's too much flow back and forth. You kind of find out pretty quickly you're watching 5 games at once and absorbing 0 of it. So I tried to then narrow my focus to more one game at a time. I just wanted to see so many basketball games, Zach. We had so many fun games to watch, and I was glad to have them. I just had to figure out, how am I doing this again for another year? I think one game at a time, though, was what ended up being what my strategy was.
That's right. I always find myself going to that d3hoops.com scoreboard page or like the schedule page and looking at the list. Gives you appreciation for just how many games are out there, how many viewing options you have. But Um, yeah, a lot to take in. The regular season is just getting started, but Matt, the football regular season is just about to end. Just a quick announcement for our audience that may also have some Division three football interest. The regular season ends this Saturday. We're going to be doing some live NPI updates as that playoff field comes into view, tracking that picture for those at-large bids and the overall seating. So check that out if you have any interest in Division three football. That'll be easy to find on our main page at d3datacast.com.
Yeah, if you watched our bubble watch last year in basketball, it'll be a little bit of a similar setup. Who's in the football tournament, who's out, what are the seedings going to look like? So follow d3datacast.com next Saturday for all of your football NPI live updates.
So, a lot of action already underway, lots to talk about. Let's jump into it, Matt, with the new segment we debuted last week in our week one show. Now we've got, you know, a new 4-point play, the second ever 4-point play in D3 Datacast history. This is where we get out our compasses, look at the 4 points of the compass, and use that to kind of guide our discussion as we scan the Division three landscape. I imagine at some point here we'll mix up our order, Matt. But let's start with what you're thinking about, what caught your eye, maybe in however you want to define the north area of the country.
Who's going fourth in the North? I'm going to talk about the CCIW. I think that's going to be a pretty good conference this year. They came out of the gate pretty strong, a 4-1 record on opening weekend. We still haven't seen Illinois Wesleyan, Augustana, Elmhurst, or North Central, so still a bunch of teams left to play in the CCIW. But Carthage, Milliken, North Park, Wheaton all recorded wins. Carroll was the only team that played and lost, but they were on the road against number 5 Wash U. That was a tight game most of the way. Carroll had a lead with about 7 minutes to play. Then Wash U really took over and executed down the stretch. I was kind of preparing myself for, wow, this is like a Wash U number 5. Did I have them too high moment? They ended up winning that game by 12, which is kind of, fair enough against a CCIW opponent. But that wasn't, for being the CCIW's only loss, that wasn't like a terrible looking loss for Carroll. So pretty good from the CCIW. We expect big things from that conference every year. I think they've been out of the gate strong. Looking to see some of the rest of those teams play. I think we expect a great season out of Illinois Wesleyan. I think Augustana is going to be fairly strong as well. The whole league is deep, right? That's why it's one of the best conferences in Division three. So really good stuff from the CCIW. Hard to tell a whole lot from one weekend. I think that's going to be one of the themes of this episode, but we're going to try to tell us whatever we can, right? So 4-1 record for the CCIW. Nice start from them.
Yeah, I mentioned using the d3hoops.com scoreboard or schedule page there to check out games. That was one of those. I was checking in and out of various games, and oftentimes you and I will have our little text exchange. Just be like, hey, I think at that point it was like a 2-point game, just kind of like messaging back and forth. Do you have your eye on this? So definitely a competitive game there out of Carroll, and maybe one where the 12-point margin doesn't really indicate the kind of game that it actually was. All right, Matt. So for my choice here in the north, let's go north, but also east to the Great Northeast Athletic Conference. It's a conference that we talked a lot about, had our eye on coming into the season, and I'll label the opening weekend for the GNAC a bit of a mixed bag for them. They've got a group of top teams that we've talked about, and they got into some of those measuring stick games, so to speak, with some of the maybe the what you'd kind of classically consider like the bigger brother conferences
Mhm.
in and around that Northeast area. Kind of a mixed bag. St. Joseph's, Maine got a blowout win over Old Westbury, which I think is kind of what you would expect out of a team like St. Joe's, being in or around that top 25 picture. And then lost in overtime to NYU. NYU, of course, a team we didn't really know what to make of. So much turnover there, both in terms of the roster and the coaching staff. But Matt, I think that's a game that it's a loss for St. Joe's, overtime loss at NYU. But I think that's one of those games that probably says more to the positive for NYU than to the negative for St. Joe's. St. Joseph, Connecticut, they get past Worcester State, but fell to Mass Dartmouth. That seems like maybe one for a team that's in and around the top 25 that you'd like to see come out of the opening weekend 2-0. So again, maybe a little of a mixed bag there, but hey, maybe Mass Dartmouth is going to be better than expected. They've had a little bit of a step back, kind of following the Marcus Azor year, but maybe they're due for about a bounce back. It's always tough to know with this opening weekend, how much do you react to? Are you underreacting? Are you overreacting? I think at this point it's just an observation. Maybe you would have liked to seen a little bit more of the Blue Jays. Albertus Magnus led Swarthmore at the half, but that's another one. Ultimately, they lost, and that was in our pick slate a week ago, a game that the preseason efficiency ratings had Albertus as the favorite, but that's a loss there. LaSalle gave up a bucket, Matt, in their game with WPI to send that one to overtime and ended up losing by 12. Another one of those games where it goes in the loss column. Maybe the margin doesn't look great, but also doesn't do service to the kind of game that it was. So, another one that was in our picks, and one that I said I expected WPI to win, but I took the points with LaSalle. I'm already going to call shenanigans. We'll get into our picks review later. I'm already going to call shenanigans on that one because, um, ultimately it was a cover for WPI, but it took that overtime period to do it. So, I think some good results, maybe not always in the form of wins, but kind of call it a mixed bag. It's definitely worth keeping our eye on that 14 mix in the GNAC.
Yeah, and these were the teams we've been talking about in the preseason, and how close were they to having some really great results? Like LaSalle could have won that game. St. Joseph, Connecticut, maybe really would like to be 2-0. That was a close loss they had there to Mass Dartmouth. St. Joseph's, Maine, in overtime, at one point in that overtime, had a 7-point lead against NYU. Like they could have won that game. So I think it shows that the top of this conference, or maybe it's a data point. It doesn't show it, but it's a data point that they are the types of teams we think they are, playing with these other maybe more bigger names like we expect for the most part. So I think that's really good. But they are probably coming away a little bit disappointed. Like, man, we could have gotten some of these great wins, Zach. I wanted to make sure to talk about that NYU St. Joseph's Maine game a little bit later on, but I'll just maybe cram it in here while we're doing the 4-point play and already discussing it. I think you're exactly right that it says more about NYU to the positive than St. Joseph's Maine to the negative. When I was just watching this game, just kind of eye testing it, it looks like two like tournament caliber teams. It didn't look like anyone was taking a step back really from where they were last year. And I say that because NYU was a team that was, even though they were the national runner-up, they were a wait-and-see team for me because of how much turnover they had. Almost their entire roster plus their head coach. We just didn't know how things were going to fit together, what players were going to be playing minutes for them, really. But they looked really good. I think St. Joseph also looked like the team we thought they could be. It was just that two great teams played on opening weekend and ended up with a close game. A game like could have gone either way. St. Joseph's, even in that overtime, I think it was a 7-point lead they had at one point. And then NYU executed, headed a great stretch with a couple of offensive rebounds on some missed attempts. St. Joseph couldn't end the possession, and NYU ended up kind of pulling away at the end. But really great game. I think they both looked really good. So I'm not really I probably won't think about this game in a way that really dings my expectations of St. Joe, Maine. It is probably more of NYU is back in that top 25 mix. Again, trying not to overreact to just the opening weekend.
Yeah, I think fair to watch that game and think, okay, I could see this being like maybe like a second round NCAA tournament game where the winner of that is going on to the Sweet 16. All right, let's flip the compass around here, head to the South, Matt. What are you seeing, thinking about in the South?
Yeah, if we go south of me, we'll probably hit some Heartland Collegiate Athletic Conference teams. So I'm gonna shoehorn the HCAC down into our south from our 4 point play here. A little bit of a slow start for the HCAC on opening weekend. I think they were 2-5. But the two wins were both by Franklin. So let's highlight Franklin here. They beat two MIAA opponents. It was Olivet and Hope on back-to-back nights, both games by double digits. Pretty impressive. Franklin won 22 games last year. They got into the NCAA tournament. They won a game in the NCAA tournament. So, like, from that standpoint, not really a surprise that Franklin looked good coming out of the gate. But I had them down as a team that had a bunch of production to replace. And it looks like they've done well replacing that. Their roster looked good. I just was glancing through their roster again today. It looks like it's still pretty young. I think there's some promising things for Franklin. Looks like this season and maybe into the future. The only team that got a win, they got two of them. I think they've put the HCAC on notice. I think Franklin right now, early season, they look like the favorites to me in the HCAC. Like I said, they won that conference tournament, got the AQ last year, so maybe not a surprise, but it was a surprise to me that they looked. And Olivet and Hope, I think those are two of the top four teams in the MIAA. So I think that's pretty good level of competition. I think Olivet's, they have a tough non-conference schedule. This is one of those tough games. I think they're going to prove themselves to be pretty good once we see the total end of the season. But yeah, impressive stuff from Franklin here opening weekend.
Just to throw another data point in that mix, Matt, Anderson played the same two teams. Franklin ended the weekend 2-0. Anderson came out of it 0-2.
Yep. Yeah.
So there you
So,
go.
I mean, if you're looking for what's the order in the HCAC, two teams that we thought could have been in that mix, they were kind of the top two teams, two of the top teams fighting last year. Franklin has the early advantage when you're just looking at benchmarking teams against other opponents.
And I'll say, as someone who spent a couple years living in Indianapolis, there's a strange mix of people there who have like no accent versus like deeply Southern accents. I don't exactly know. I never could figure out what was going on there. But Matt, I'll allow you picking the HCAC as your south here on your compass. But as you said, it is south of you, Matt. Now I don't want to steal too much of your thunder because, despite how it may appear at times on this show, we do some prep and coordination ahead of time. But I want to talk about that opening weekend tournament at Virginia Wesleyan, the tip-off tournament down there. I feel like it was always going to be set up as one of the big events to talk about coming out of this weekend, really no matter what happened. And so for me, one of the takeaways that the field was, I think, as good as advertised, or how as it appeared going in. And I was struck that the results of that tournament were pretty well in line with how you might set up expectations based on the D3Hoops.com top 25. However, we didn't get the Hampton-Sydney Virginia Wesleyan head-to-head. And if you look at just the overall results, the overall scores and margins for the weekend, that might be one case where you take the indirect comparison and say that maybe Hampton-Sydney and Virginia Wesleyan should be in the opposite order from what they are in the preseason top 25 there, with Virginia Wesleyan being the higher ranked team. But you look at the results of the weekend, maybe Hampton-Sydney was a little bit more impressive overall. Again, how much is that overreacting? How much is that trying to make something of something that's not there? Again, it's an indirect comparison. The good news is we will get that direct comparison later in the season when Hampton-Sydney and Virginia Wesleyan do make their one meeting in ODAC play. So again, thankfully it's a head-to-head matchup we will get later in the season. Going to be very interesting to see how that plays out. But overall, a great tip-off tournament. We knew it would be going in. And unfortunate, Keene State has to be the one to leave that 0-2. But I think especially Friday night, I think they acquitted themselves very well. It was one of the games in our picks, and part of my reasoning was I just felt like Virginia Wesleyan's roster was maybe set up to hit the ground running a little bit better than maybe Keene State was, but I didn't really get the feeling of that was the case at all. Watching that first half, it was kind of a back and forth, even affair. Keene State was very much ready to play that game on the same level as Virginia Wesleyan.
Yeah, and kind of feels awful for Keene State to then come away with this weekend 0-2. We knew someone was gonna have that happen. But they don't seem like a team that is 0-2 and like, oh, they really got to fix stuff. they're going to win a bunch of games this year. They're going to be competitive in the Little East, I think. And I don't think that this weekend showed really them negatively. I think it did show them that they are able to compete with those other top 25 teams. I think they're kind of doing a little bit of a reload. It's maybe not the same Keene State team that we saw 2 or 3 years ago. It's going to be kind of new faces, new names, but they still look pretty good to me. I love, as a top 25 voter, being able to benchmark these top 25 or watch list teams against each other, and then like the opportunity to switch opponents kind of and see other games. To me, this series of games sort of validated, I felt, kind of where I put teams in the poll. I had kind of UW La Crosse up high. Then I had kind of Virginia Wesleyan in the middle, maybe. Hampton Sydney, I think I had them around 18. No, I had them at 21. But I think you're right. Coming out of this weekend, if I was making like quick overreactions, if I had to make a new poll right now, I would probably at least flip the order of Hampton Sydney and Virginia Wesleyan. Might even move Hampton Sydney up a couple of slots from there. They did look really good, I think, and they were toe-to-toe with UW La Crosse, and that was, a great weekend. Even to come out of it 1-1, you had to feel really good about what you did.
Let's head out west. What do you see in your west view?
Yeah, I'll take a team from Region 9. I'll go a kind of a small, out-of-the-way, unheralded conference. I'm going to go to the WIAC. I think they might have something cooking this year. The WIAC might be good. We just talked about UW La Crosse going out and getting 2 wins against top 25 ODAC opponents, but that wasn't all that they had. UW Oshkosh beat St. John's. Stevens Point beat MSOE by 20. Eau Claire and Whitewater got wins over fellow Wisconsin schools St. Norbert and Wesleyan. Platteville finished things off for the conference on Sunday with a win over Nebraska Wesleyan. These are big name programs for the WIAC, wins against big name programs for the most part for the WIAC. It's still really early. We'll have to see how things play out. But WIAC are setting themselves up really nicely here. They do it kind of year after year, but this is why kind of these good big programs get high rankings and high seedings in the NPIs, because they go out in the non-conference and they win a bunch of games against other teams who will probably go on and win a bunch of games in their conference. The UW schools doing it once again. Opening weekend, I know. Overreacting, I know. But going and getting all these wins right away and through your non-conference schedule, that's how you set yourself up to get those top 4 seeds, get top 8 protected seeds, hosting opportunities and the like. Wouldn't be surprised when all is said and done if we see, a WIAC team or 2 hosting first-round NCAA tournament games.
The WIAC is good. There, you heard it here first. Hashtag analysis. The WIAC is good. All right, I'm going to look a little further west, Matt. And I want to be sensitive to the fact that our island schools in our island region have a tendency to be underappreciated, maybe underpublicized. But is it okay for me to admit that I feel like I learned nothing or have no opinions about what feels like a pretty nondescript opening weekend for the SCIAC and the Northwest Conference? So Redlands is the headliner there in the Pacific time zone based on their lofty preseason ranking. And while they got a pair of wins, I'm not sure that the score lines really reflect what you might want to see out of a team ranked so highly. The only thing that really jumps out is a pair of blowout wins by Claremont Mud Scripps, a 34-point win over Pacific, a 38-point win over George Fox. But those are the 2 teams at the bottom of the Northwest Conference in our preseason efficiency ratings, both of them outside the top 250. Again, I don't want to overreact to that and say suddenly that CMS is great. They've been a very good program for a number of years now. You expect some level of quality. I'm not sure that this necessarily is, the statement that is going to indicate that is going to continue to be the case, or that they're going to be right there challenging Redlands for the SCIAC. At the same time, some of those Redlands margins were a little bit closer than I might have expected. So I just I don't want to overreact. I don't want to underreact. Overall, I just didn't see a lot to really latch onto yet for our SCIAC and Northwest Conference friends.
Yeah, and one of the difficulties about this time of year is you find yourself playing the scoring margin game a little bit too often. They won, but it was only by 8, and I thought it was going to be by 14. And then you have to think, how meaningful is that, or is that not, right? So I do the exact same thing, especially when I'm looking at how did my top 25 teams perform. And after a little while, I got to say, It was one game, it was one weekend. They either won or they didn't win, or it was close or it was not close. And like, I'm just gonna have to move on and wait for more data to arrive. But I think you're right. Like, it felt like a weekend went by and we didn't really learn anything new or anything super exciting about what we thought of the teams. Like the other teams that are probably pretty good are probably still going to be pretty good. No one was like shockingly great or shockingly awful. I don't think it was just kind of a little bit of what we expected.
And you mix in, there's a lot of just games against non D3 opponents,
Yeah, which they have to get right.
which yeah, I mean, there's very good reasons for that just based on their isolation. So I'm not denigrating, that choice at all. But it's just like to be honest, I hardly ever look at a result against a non D3 because I just don't know what to do with it, or it's not really meaningful in the grand scheme of kind of what we're considering here. So I almost it's almost like it didn't even happen. So yeah, it just kind of adds into the overall mix that I feel like I'm just kind of waiting to learn more, or have something to really
Yeah.
kind of feel some sort of emotion about in the SCIAC or the Northwest Conference. All right, 1 point left on the compass, Matt. Let's go east.
Yeah, I'm gonna be excited about the NESCAC coming into the fold, deciding that they do in fact want to play with everyone else. Next weekend they will come into the fold. Overall, for one of the best leagues out there, opening weekend for them next weekend, not great quality of opponents, I guess, on the whole. There are some really good games mixed in. Friday night, we're going to get Tufts and Babson. Okay, that's a good game. That's a game I want to watch. That's a game I want to find the score of. Saturday, we get Hamilton and Ithaca. I'm like, okay, that's a pretty good game. Sunday, we'll have Tufts again against Endicott. Con College, Emerson, Bowdoin, Brandeis. Okay, like we're getting teams from other good conferences in here. So there are a few in there that are pretty good. To me, the NESCAC's another year of being a surefire, like top three type conference. They are almost every single season. Good to see them join the rest of the country, especially see Tufts have two of those games that I'm really interested in seeing. Like it when other good programs challenge themselves. I know they're going to get enough strong play in the NESCAC. But there's a couple of teams there, like right Trinity, Connecticut, Tufts. I have at the top of my ballot. And when you go through the opening weekend and you get a couple of top five teams, I know some other programs haven't played yet, but some teams like that you don't get to see, you get a little bit disappointed. Like, oh man, I haven't gotten to see like who did I vote number 1 and number 4 that haven't quite played yet. So excited to see the NESCAC next week, join everyone else, play some games, and we'll really have things rolling after next weekend.
Everyone joins the party at that point, right?
Yep.
Let's get going. Um, it's that self-imposed different start time from the rest of the division, but it'll be good to have them join the fray. All right, Matt, I'm gonna expand the view here. I think the spirit of this segment is really to get us to take a wider view than we might otherwise. Sometimes we can get very top 25 focused, very kind of national tournament focused. And so I want to maybe step back here and let's talk about Salisbury here. They were a team last year that I think was really kind of playing themselves into position into the national radar. Uh, you know, you might forget, but they had non-conference wins like Johns Hopkins, at Virginia Wesleyan, at Gettysburg, at York, Pennsylvania. Yeah, I think that's a start of what you'd look at as like a really good non-conference resume as you're building there. They looked like tournament contenders there. Then February hit, and it was a 0-5 swoon against Christopher Newport and Mary Washington. Um, that really kind of wiped that all away and took them out of the mix. But because of that, it was easy to forget kind of the position they had played themselves into, despite not being able to ultimately take advantage of it. But this weekend, just one game for the Seagulls, but it was a win against Stockton. A team that's always in the mix, and the NJAC is no stranger to NCAA tournament appearances, that kind of thing. And so it just got me thinking, that's a pretty decent opening win for Salisbury. You think back to what they were doing through part of that season of the season a year ago, and it just got me thinking, is this a team maybe we should start paying attention to? Big week coming up for them, Matt. The Seagulls have games against Hampton, Sydney, and Washington and Lee this week. Couple ODAC opponents is going to give us a lot more information. Just one that I kind of had in the back of my mind, remembering some of those mid-season episodes we were doing as we were trying to see what the developing tournament picture might look like. And there was a time that they were kind of in the mix there before falling off. And with them coming out of the gate with a win against Stockton, I think that they could be a team that maybe people would be a little bit too late to get on their radar. Um, just an interesting team
Yeah.
possibly to watch.
Yeah, and Salisbury being in the coast to coast conference, you don't have a conference schedule to rely on. So they got to go out and get these games. Good to see them play teams like Stockton, like Hampton, Sydney. They do play the Christopher Newports and Mary Washington conference opponents usually twice, but they don't have a full schedule, so they got to go out and play. It's nice to see them get these kind of games, and it'll be fun to see like what can they do. We saw them beat Stockton. What can they do against a Hampton, Sydney, right, or a Washington and Lee, two quality ODAC opponents most years. So yeah, good shout out there for Salisbury.
All right, following up the 4-point play, Matt, this is a time usually we'd take a look at your new top 25 ballot. There will not be a new poll, just with 3 days worth of games here. Not going to be another poll for a couple weeks, I believe. So I just wanted to get your top 25 minded reactions to the opening weekend. Are you even thinking in top 25 terms as you're watching results rolling in? Or you just kind of enjoy it, take it in as it comes now, and then you'll worry about how maybe that all works in the top 25 once you've got the full information that you need to vote on? Or are you kind of always making a little bit of some sort of live mental adjustment along the way? um, Thought it might be interesting to get the voters perspective kind of in an in-between week like this,
Yeah,
especially coming right out of the gate.
right. Yeah, I mean, I am and I'm not, right? Because it's hard to one game, two games to take way too much out of it, especially when results if results are kind of sort of in line. I do kind of think when a result comes through and it's a top 25 team or a team I have in my top 25 especially, I do kind of think like, okay, is that a plus or minus or a neutral type game? So even though a team might win a game, it might be close, and it's like, well, that's still like maybe a little bit of a minus. So I did kind of take a mental like this team up down. We mentioned maybe even with a 1-1 record, Hampton Sydney would move up a few spots for me. A team like Calvin, right, lost on the road to Denison by 2 in what was supposed to be a close game, and it was. I had them at 11. Feels like maybe more that's like a 15 to 20 kind of weekend for Calvin. I don't know, something like that. So I might look at teams kind of in that standpoint. I had Catholic at 15. They lost a big game. If I was voting this week, they'd probably come all the way out. I'll definitely keep assessing them, but they might be a team that's moving. Wash U playing close with Carroll for most of the game, but then winning by whatever that was, 12 points or so. I had them at 5. That feels like maybe they need to come down. At this point of the year, though, it feels like you get more results of teams you ranked highly, maybe not feeling like they lived up to expectations in the one or two times you saw them, versus there's a bunch of teams trying to jump up. So I also have to keep that in mind, like what is an impressive or not impressive result. A team like Randolph-Macon going on the road against Gettysburg and winning by 3 points. Gettysburg's been a good team. Randolph-Macon I had all the way up at number 2, but I wasn't voting for Gettysburg. Like that's probably not a really big negative result or anything. I think that's a fine result, but we just don't have a lot of data points. It's hard to make too much of this. As much as I would love a new poll right away, the next one's not coming out for two more weeks, so I think we'll have time to watch and adjust. So I'm trying not to go crazy trying to reassess a full top 25. I'm just taking those little mental notes, a positive, negative, up, down, but I'll really do a full reassess, after next week's games, and then actually going into that poll, I think for Monday, November 24, really look at it deeply there.
So if we put you on the spot here, do we get you to commit to a mock bracket, or sorry, a mock ballot next week, even though there's no poll?
Maybe. I mean, I could put up a this is where I'm thinking kind of a thing. We maybe did that last year. At least directional, right? I don't think I would like don't hold me to it, feet to the fire kind of a thing, but I can spend some time and put them together. I think that makes sense for next week.
Yeah, just observing the top 25, as we well know, the top 25 didn't come out of opening weekend unscathed, but I didn't see anything that was really like an eye-opening, shocking result out of a top 25 that I thought would really necessarily cause anyone to make some sweeping reevaluations.
Right. Well, and I mentioned that Calvin game. Denison could be really, really good. We don't know any of these teams fully, right? So if Denison is like a number 10, 15, 20 type team, then losing on the road to them by 2 doesn't really change much of where you were if people had Calvin at 10, 11, 12, 15 or whatever too. So we're going to learn a whole lot about all these teams, and that changes your view of what each result was or was not.
And we talked about it with that St. Joe's Maine NYU game. Sometimes there's a result, and it's not that you might be inclined to take St. Joe's off your ballot so much as put NYU in your ballot.
Sure. Yeah. Yep.
All right, gonna be fun to see how that continues to develop. I feel like a year ago maybe we had a little bit more top 25 carnage out of the gate. Really didn't feel like we saw that. We'll have to see what that looks like as we're talking next week, and that's why it might be fun to get you to do a mock ballot. Any other maybe high level thoughts coming out of the opening weekend? Sometimes it's kind of tough with just 3 games. You have some teams that don't play at all. Some teams might play 1 game. Some do play 2. Just kind of high level thoughts other than, hey, it's great to be back.
Yeah, no, it's good to be back. I think you're right. I think most of the teams performed pretty well that we thought were going to be good. I don't think there was like oh no, this team just like does not have it for a team that I had in like the top 10 or something like that. A lot of the teams looked really good. If we're looking at those teams to bump up, I think maybe I mentioned UW Lacrosse might be one of those teams. I think Carthage, I had them at 9. That might not be high enough. I think they continue to be strong. They had a really big win as well on opening night. So, yeah, I mean, not too many specifics that I'm going to commit to at this point.
Sounds good. All right, we had our episode in the preseason about the preseason efficiency ratings. We've talked about those a couple of times. I think we made mentioned, Matt, about NPI. All of these are resources that we have available for fans as they follow the season here. Resources we have available at d3datacast.com. I want to take a little bit of time here just to kind of go through those as a refresher. We may have some people that are following us, following Division III basketball for the very first time. Wanted to just kind of systematically go through kind of what those resources we have available are, and maybe give some additional insight or perspective in how they all fit together, work together, complement each other.
Yeah, so here on your screen now is d3datacast.com. You'll notice there are no ads on the website. Thanks for the folks on Patreon. Just first off, if you want to go and click this little black P icon, that'll take you to our Patreon page, and you can participate along with everyone else and help keep this data ad-free. But one thing you can do, you can always find our show links here. But one thing I like is the efficiency ratings. You can find it both for men's basketball and women's basketball. I'll click on the men's basketball page here. Once it loads in, this is our team ratings page. If you want a little bit more information about what goes into it, especially to start the year, we had a preseason efficiency ratings episode, probably 3 or 4 episodes back. Zach will maybe post that in the show description below if you want to click on that one. But this is the team ratings. It's efficiency margin and efficiency based, which is points per 100 possessions. So on offense, your offensive rating is how many points does your team score per 100 possessions. Your defensive rating is how many points they allow per 100 possessions, and it's opponent adjusted. So if you play a good team and if you play a top 5 team and you lose by 1 point, this will say that you are really, really good, because you played a really, really good team and you went toe-to-toe with them. If you play a really, really bad team and you win by 8 points, that might say that is not a great game, because an average team should have won that game by 15 or 20 points and you only won by 8. So it takes into account how good your opponent is and what their results have been to date. So this looks at games in the past, games that we've already played. At this point in the year, it has some of that preseason projection built into it. And again, go to the previous episode to find out about that. But after we get 8 games into the season for each team, the preseason weightings will fall out. It'll just be in-season data, and we'll just be talking about what have teams done on the court this year. Another thing we have, which is very key for teams hoping to make the NCAA tournament, is we have a replication of the NCAA's NPI data. This is also taking results that have already happened. So if you look under the top link bar at NPI, we have men's basketball NPI, and we'll also have women's basketball NPI. We're really early in the season, so the rankings don't really make a whole lot of sense, because some teams haven't played, some teams have only played 1 or 2 games. But this looks at what's your Division 3 record, your wins and your losses? What's your adjusted record? Because we have a multiplier in Division 3 basketball. So like a home win is only worth 0.9 and an away win is worth 1.1. So the adjusted wins and losses take that multiplier into account. What's your strength of schedule? And in an NPI context, that's your opponent's NPI. And then what's your NPI? That's the number we care about, right? So your NPI, and this is what we're using, what NCAA Division III is using to select and seed teams in the national tournament. So teams that win their automatic qualifier from their conference, they are automatically selected into the tournament, and then the next 21 teams by NPI are the at-large bids. So we have done the work to replicate the NCAA's numbers, and so to whatever degree that our score database is complete, it will match the NCAA's score database and get us NPI values. And so we keep track of this all season long, and you'll be able to get up-to-date numbers of where your team stands in the NPI rankings based on games that they've already played. So that's another interesting thing to look at. But Zach, we won't want to stop there. We like to marry these two things. So let's look at NPI. Let's look at how good our computer thinks all the teams are. And let's marry those together and try to project into the future. Let's try to simulate into the future to see not just where teams are now 2 games into the season with an NPI number that doesn't really matter at this point. Let's look at where might those NPI numbers go, who might be making the tournament. So you can go from there to the NPI tab, either men's basketball or women's basketball projections. And what we do is we run every future scheduled game through our efficiency ratings data to project the likelihood that a team wins any given game. Then we use kind of like a coin flip random number generator to decide who actually won that game. Not a coin flip, a weighted random number generator to decide who won that game. We do that for every game in a season. We seed a conference tournament. We simulate that conference tournament. We calculate NPIs, and then we do the whole thing 1,000 times, right? So we do a bunch of seasons, and then we see who's going to make the tournament. So our top page, when you go to the men's basketball NPI projections, this is a bubble watch view. This becomes more relevant when we get toward the end of the season, especially towards conference tournament. But then if you keep scrolling down past the explanation, then you get a full view of the computer simulation projections. And what this breaks down is in those, let's say 1,000 simulations, what percentage of the time did a specific team end up making the tournament, either through their automatic bid or through an at-large bid? What percentage of the time were they a top 4 overall seed in NPI, or top 8 overall seed, or top 16 overall seed in NPI? What percentage of the time did they get in by winning their AQ for their conference, usually conference tournament or the UAA regular season champion, but their conference's designated automatic qualifier? What percentage of the time did they get that? If they didn't win their AQ, what percentage of the time left then did they get the at-large if they needed it, right? You failed to win your AQ, what percentage of the time do you get the at-large? That's a really key number for a lot of teams. A lot of teams and coaches like that number toward the end of the season. Like, hey, what's our chance if we get in if we don't make the tournament, right? That's a really big number. Then we like to look at the conference tournaments, those conferences that have one. If a specific team made the finals, what percentage of the time then did they make the tournament, or did they get the at-large bid? If they lost in the semifinals or if they lost in the quarterfinals as well. So all this information we have d3datacast.com. It's very forward-looking, but that's what feeds into it. It takes the efficiency ratings, it looks at the NPI, and it projects that out to the end of the season. Now it's very early. We don't actually know how good or not good a lot of these teams are. So the data is going to change as we get more information. Whenever a team plays a game, their efficiency ratings change, their actual NPI will change, but also their projection will probably change a little bit through the simulations. If a team gets a bunch of really positive results in a row, you'll start to see their simulations trend more and more positively. If you get a bunch of negative results in a row, and again, not just wins and losses, but how do you play against a specific set of opponents, then if you get negative results, then your projections might start to trend more negatively. I think all of this is kind of fun and games in November and December. But once you get into mid to late January and February, it starts to look really, really real. And Zach, I think what we found last year is that the projections in conference tournament play, especially going in the last few days, the percentages started to get spot on. We started to find out like, okay, you need to this team to win, this team to lose, otherwise you're not in. And here's the scenarios where you are in. I think that was really fun to see down the stretch last year.
And especially the final day, those final at-large bids were up for grabs, and then conference tournament upset. You know, cross off that bottom team on the list, right? And it
Yeah.
was very ordered as to who was going to be next to get, to be on the chopping block there. And you just, for those teams on the
Yep.
bubble, you just hope that you run out of potential conference
Yep.
tournament upsets, and that they're still there.
Every time we
So
had a
yeah,
bid thief, one team fell off, and then the next team, boom,
yep.
plopped right down. And you see in the simulations, up at the top of this table here, we've had some simulations out of the 1,000 where there were no bid thieves. We had some simulations where there were 9 bid thieves. So you can get it varies wildly who wins these semifinal and final matchups in conference tournaments. It can really change the bubble picture and where that actually sets.
Right. And those team ratings, those efficiency ratings, help determine who are the favorites, right? Favorites are favorites because they're more likely to win, but they don't always win, right? So,
Mm-hmm.
with another section there, Matt, I don't know if you want to pull up the daily score prediction page, but that's another thing that flows out of those efficiency ratings. You can take that, put together a team matchup, and say, this team playing this team at this location, kind of a predicted most likely score is this, and you can work out like a win probability to see, like, sometimes there is an upset. Upsets do happen. How big of an upset was it? Was it more of like a 50-50 game, or was this, a team that had like a 10% win probability that won? And that also is why the simulation based approach for the projections is so important, because the best teams don't always win. You take like an 80-20 win probability game, you should expect that when you run 1,000 simulations, that team wins 80% of those matchups and loses 20% of those matchups. And so it's just a matter of how do different win probabilities all fit together to make that full scenario that
Yep.
outputs a particular projection. And so again, what it's not so much giving you a black and white thing, but it's showing you maybe who has more margin for error, who has less margin for error, who has wider paths, who has narrower
Yeah.
paths.
Yeah. Yeah. And I pulled up the computer score projections for women's basketball on the screen here. Women's data, I tend to go with the blue and seafoam motif, and men's, I tend to go with the blue and gold motif. That's just a visual for me to know which page I'm on. But you can see here, yeah, we give any individual matchup. There's a kind of average score prediction. So if two teams play as their rating says they might, then this team might win by 3 points or 3.5 points or 5 points. And we turn that scoring margin into a percentage. Like this is a 60-40 game, 80-20, like you said. But one thing we're experimenting on, and you can see it over on the right side, is how might any individual game change a team's tournament percentage? So we're calling that's game leverage, right? So there's a game here from Sunday. Emory played Mary Hardin Baylor. Emory was the away team, and according to the latest runs of simulations that we had, Emory's tournament odds went up by 18 percentage points in a win on that game. I think they did win that game. So that was a good win for them. Mary Hardin Baylor's leverage on that was only 2 percentage points. So their in versus out didn't change as much as Emory's might in that game. And then we also have a just for fun number on the far right side, which is a game score number. It's kind of like a quick and dirty attempt at a excitement factor for the game. So how good are the two teams? That's a higher score. How close is the game supposed to be? That's a higher score. And what's the combined total leverage for the two teams? So if it has more tournament impact, then that also improves the higher score. So if you're just like a neutral fan and you want an interesting game, go to the score predictions page for either men's or women's, whatever you're interested in seeing, and just check out what's the highest rated game. See if it makes some sense, then maybe tune into that game. That's something fun that we're going to keep track of this year.
Good overview. Yeah, a lot of great information there. Hopefully helps give some context, give some additional flavor onto your Division three basketball viewing throughout the year. Um, yeah, I have a lot of fun following it just myself, Matt. So it's great. It's great stuff. Thanks for going through it. Um, anything else to say? A lot of this, we didn't really debut last year being kind of the new system with NPI, the first year going through that. Some of this stuff didn't debut until later in the year, but hey, it's up and running now. So we might as well start the bubble watch early, I guess.
I mean, great fun. Last thing I'll say is I call it out on my NPI pages. I do get the game score data from the Massey Ratings database. If a game is not in the Massey Ratings schedule page, it won't show up on that day's score predictions page currently. I'm going to try to figure out a way to get around some of that. But that's the current situation. That's why a game might be missing. Especially we had some tournaments on opening weekend where winners play winners, and that game wasn't the Massey database updated retroactively after that game, but wasn't in time for us to get it here. So I might have some workarounds in the coming days. But just if a game's missing, that's probably why it's missing, especially early on in the season like this.
You made mention of all of that information being on d3datacast.com ad-free and without being behind a paywall. Let's bring up our list of Patreon supporters here so we can give a big thank you and recognition to them. Really grateful for their ongoing support. A couple new shout outs that joined us this week since the last episode at the Great Job Team tier: Hoop Kids ATL and Kyle Winya. Thank you so much for joining the great group of supporters we have here. We couldn't do what we do without their support. And yeah, I mean, everything there, no pop-ups, no banner ads, everything is there, ad-free, without paywalls, accessible to the entire Division three basketball community. Something we're able to offer because we have people who volunteer to support us in this way.
And we're the D3 Datacast, so we love that type of information. We like putting it out there. We like accessing it ourselves. We like, hopefully it's a resource for other people who are or are not quite as nerdy as us. That's okay. That's why we wanted to give the quick explanation. But thanks that can be ad-free. Hopefully support quick-ish loading times if the Google form fills in there, loads in there quick enough. But it's thanks to the people at Patreon, as Zach said, that help us out. So patreon.com/D3Datacast. If you'd like to join, there's just a $3 and a $5 a month tier. So anything that you can do there would be great. Otherwise, we just hope that you enjoy the episodes and have a lot of fun along with us.
Speaking of having a lot of fun, let's talk about the picks. Last week's picks, our first pick slate of the week. Run us through it.
Yeah, first game was Keene State against Virginia Wesleyan. We talked a lot about that game. The computer line was a 4-point margin in favor of Virginia Wesleyan. Zach, we both went to Virginia Wesleyan to cover that 4 points, but that was only a 3-point spread when that game went final. So we both missed that pick, and Keene State covered that one. We talked also about LaSalle and WPI. That game went into overtime.
Shenanigans.
No shenanigans here. LaSalle had a lead with 20 seconds left, but WPI forced overtime, then ended up winning by 12. I think they scored maybe the first 10 or even 12 points of that overtime. It was a lot. It was kind of, the overtime was over before it began. I did pick WPI to cover. I thought I had lost that, and then they pulled it out in overtime. So I get the point, and that is perfectly fair. Swarthmore was 3-point underdogs at Albertus Magnus, but they won that game by 7, covering that spread easily. We both went with Swarthmore, and we both get the point there. Pacific Lutheran were 5.5-point underdogs on the road at UC Santa Cruz. We both thought that Santa Cruz could beat that computer line, and they did. They won that game by 12, so we both get the point there. And our game of the week, UW La Crosse, down at that Virginia Wesleyan tournament, won in overtime against Hampton City. That was a 5-point spread, and they won that game by 2. Although we should call shenanigans on that one. Sorry, that was a half a point line. Yeah, half a point line. So we both get the point on that one. I didn't actually talk about that game. Can I bring up a controversy that maybe is happening, brewing in that UW La Crosse Hampton Sydney game?
Always down to talk about a controversy. Get it?
There was a post on the message boards, and I was alerted to the post by friend of the show, Ryan Scott, that said that UW La Crosse had gained 2 free points at some point in the second half on the scoreboard, and that's what happened. And usually when I see stuff like that, it's like, okay, something weird happened in the game, but it got sorted out and it really wasn't a big deal. But I went back and I watched the footage I think this message board, D3 board's poster, is actually correct. I think that there were a phantom free 2 points awarded to UW La Crosse in the second half of this game. So here's what kind of happened. Early-ish in the second half, UW La Crosse was going on a run. The run kind of culminated in a J.J. Piter layup to cut the deficit to 1. So the scoreboard and the score bug said that Hampton-Sydney was still up by 1 after this layup. Hampton-Sydney inbounds the ball and they want a timeout. They're running to the sideline to get a timeout because there's been a little bit of a run against them. They want to stop the bleeding. As they're about calling the timeout, the scoreboard ticks up by 2 points in Hampton-Sydney's favor. And then it tips up by 2 points in UW La Crosse's favor. And then the extra 2 points are deducted from Hampton-Sydney's score line. But UW La Crosse's does not change now. So UW La Crosse's 2 points higher than it was originally when they ended the run. At the end of the timeout, Hampton-Sydney's coaching staff is kind of recognizing this. Like, hey, we went into this timeout up by a point, and now we're down by a point. What's going on? They talk with the refs and they talk with the scorers table for a few minutes. It's eventually not changed. Doesn't seem like it's changed. And play resumes. And you can, if you go back into the play-by-play in the box score, you can kind of see this right now. At the 16:44 timestamp, it says Piter layup good. At 16:30, Hampton-Sydney took a timeout. And then at 16:30 also, it's timestamped with Piter layup good. And then the next play is a foul against UW La Crosse, coincidentally, Piter, who's 3 in a row. But there was no possession change in there between the timeout and the foul, but there was an extra 2 points layup good. I kind of sped through the rest of the game. There are several occasions where referees are talking and they're talking to the scorers table and the coaches, and that happens during the game, so I don't know what they're talking about. But I don't think this was ever reversed. I never saw this ever being reversed. This was a close game, Zach. It was expected to be a close game. This was an overtime game and a 2-point game. I would never say that with 16 minutes left, a random 2 points cost a game or defined a game or anything like that. That there's the outcome from there on out was not predetermined. But I think this did shift the odds in a non-trivial way in such a tight game in UW La Crosse's favor. I think this was a neutral site game, so no actual shenanigans going on. I think this was just a really, really massive, unfortunate, costly error. Unless I've misinterpreted something. But I went back and I watched the video and then kind of almost 10 seconds skipped the rest of the game just to see if the score ever really changed again. And it only did what seemed like after UW La Crosse baskets. Just kind of a really crazy bad mistake, I think.
It's unfortunately the kind of thing that can happen. I mean, was that a Calvin game at Adrian in which we saw a player foul out with 4 fouls, right?
Yeah, 2 players I think fouled out with 4 fouls.
Yeah, right. It was a situation where you feel like, okay, well, they assigned it to the wrong person, but that means, he got one he shouldn't have, but that means, the other guy has 1 fewer, and then that guy gets the next one, and it's like, they're disqualifying him on a foul out as well. And so sometimes mistakes happen and it's very, very unfortunate. But again, we've seen it happen, not with scoring, but with, other things that, need to be kept track of at the scorers table. And,
yeah,
you just hate to see it.
Yeah, and I want to be clear. I don't think anyone in UW La Crosse did anything wrong. They were just playing basketball, and I think it was just a scoring. I think it was just a scoring error that didn't get found and corrected during the game.
There we go.
All right. Well, anyway, let's recap our scores. Scoring errors, I think, are not had here. Zach, you went 3-2. I went 4-1, so I am up by 1 point after 1 week. If you are playing along, keep track of your scores as well, because I know several people on social media, Twitter/X, and YouTube comments have posted their picks. So keep track of your scores, and you'll probably beat us because lots of people do. I think Did Ryan point out on the show or after the show that the 2 years that I won, he actually won? So I think Ryan Scott is the correct champion for
Yeah.
for
Yeah,
23 and
he
25.
was on as a guest picker last week,
Yeah.
and he agreed with all my picks, Matt. So you've got a lead on him as
Okay,
well
that's
at
good.
3-2.
That's
Yeah.
good. Let's just stop it here. Anyway, let's go on to this week, Zach. Week 2 picks. Let's keep it rolling. The first game, I'll read all the games, then we'll go and pick them. The first game is Ithaca, 1 point underdogs against Cortland. The computer likes St. Thomas at home by 3.5 points over UW Whitewater. Maryville and UW Oshkosh is the third game. That is a 3.5 point line in favor of Maryville on a neutral court. Yeshiva are 9 point underdogs at Mary Washington. And our D3 Datacast game of the week is Randolph Macon against Christopher Newport. That is Randolph Macon 5 point favorites on the road, I believe. So that's a big line there. Zach, going up to the top, the computer likes likes Cortland by 1 point against Ithaca, but what's your pick?
I'm going to go with Ithaca. This is a basketball game being played ahead of the big rivalry football game for the Cortica Jug
Oh,
between
yeah.
Ithaca and Cortland. That will be on Saturday. Cortland will win the Cortica Jug, but I will take the Bombers here in the basketball game.
All right, all right. It's such a close line. I was kind of going back and forth trying to compare. Like, I think they've each played one game, and I was trying to compare scores against different opponents. You can't really do that anyway. I just ended up going such a close computer scoring line here. I just ended up going with the home team to cover the 1 point line. So I'm going to go with Cortland on this one. All right, Zach, UW Whitewater are playing St. Thomas. St. Thomas are the 3.5 point favorites here. What do you like?
I'm going with the Celts. I I will be honest, I don't have a lot of conviction or analysis to go along with it. It just feels like a small enough number for the home team. St. Thomas has been, a good program. Interesting opportunity for them here against a YX school. We'll see what happens, but I'll roll with St. Thomas.
Yeah, Zach, I think I'm thinking a little bit similarly here. I'm going to go with St. Thomas as well. Went back and forth on this one a little bit, but I think I ultimately decided, okay, St. Thomas is a team that I'm considering voting for, maybe not in that position right now with UW Whitewater. So 3.5 point line. Okay, can you win by 4 or more? Sure. So that was all the really thought that I put into it. Next one, I think this is a neutral court game. Maryville, 3.5 point favorites against UW Oshkosh. I believe this is on the home court of Illinois Wesleyan at the Jack Sikma Invitational, if I have it correct. Zach, but who do you have, Scots or Titans?
Gonna roll with the Scots here. This was a really tough one for me. You talked earlier about Oshkosh getting the opening weekend win against St. John's, but again, we just don't even really know what St. John's is because they graduated so much off of their roster. Oshkosh looked like they had a really well balanced offensive output. I really like that, but Matt, we didn't really talk about Maryville here. They had a good weekend. Had a 20-point halftime lead against Barry, I believe. I'm gonna put some faith here in the Scots. The 3.5 is a little bit, getting a little scary there. I'm not quite sure what to make of Oshkosh's win over a St. John's team that we just don't really know a lot about. So I'll go with the Scots.
Yeah, I think that's fair enough. I'm going to go against my top 25 ballot position here. I'm going to go against you with UW Oshkosh. My thinking here is I think they can at least keep it close. But I was also thinking about location. And I don't know about officiating and neutral court games. And is a WIAC school going to be more comfortable with a CCIW officiating crew than a CCS school coming in? I don't know if that's true or not true, but that's where my mind went. So I'm going to pick WIAC, not home by any standpoint, but I'm going to say that it's more of a similar environment that they're used to. So I'm going to go with the UW Oshkosh Titans for the cover, not necessarily the win, but for the cover here.
Hey, you never know. For that neutral game at the Sigma there, they might bring in the St. Louis refs. You never know.
They might do that. All right, Zach, a big number here. Mary Washington, 9 point favorites against Yeshiva. Your pick.
Okay, this is a game you brought to the slate here, Matt. So I was wondering if you were trying to bait me into a pick here. 9's a big number. Of course, we saw some big numbers in the picks last year with Yeshiva, and there were some I said, certainly that is too big of a number, and it was not even close to being a big enough number. But I'm gonna go with Yeshiva here. Give me the max plus
Okay.
9 at Mary Washington.
Yeah, I did bring this game, and it is maybe just too big of a number to make this particularly interesting. I'm also going to go with Yeshiva. We've not seen Yeshiva play yet this year, although this will not be their first game. I think they have a Wednesday game is maybe their first game of the season against Chapman. I think it might be against Chapman. So an interesting coast to coast matchup there. But yeah, I think for me, nine's just too big. I think Yeshiva, we've heard they've got some good stuff coming. They've got some top 25 votes this year. We definitely know that Mary Washington's been getting top 25 votes. They're in the poll there, but nine just feels really big. So I'm gonna just take Yeshiva to cover, even if Mary Washington does eventually win. Who knows? And our game of the week is a big one in Virginia. Randolph Macon 5-point favorites, but it's on the road against Christopher Newport. Zach, how are you picking?
I'm potentially picking against my better judgment here because I feel like time and time again, the lesson is don't bet against Randolph Macon. But as you said, a 5 point favorite on the road against a really good opponent seems like too much. So give me the home captains.
Yeah, Zach, I did the same thing. I just thought five on the road, and I just went with the home team there. Randolph Macon is higher ranked, but they're both in my top 12. So to me, that's a close game, and five just felt really big. So captains to cover should be a really good game, though.
All right, if you want to play along with us, you can leave your picks as a comment on the video. You can reach out to us, leave a comment on our social media post for this episode. A lot of fun to see what people are picking and have you play along with us. Speaking of leaving a comment, we had a comment on last week's episode, which we'll pick up here in the mailbag from Harrison Taylor, who says, with the new Flow Sports / streaming deals in place in D3 Sports, how do you all plan on watching games nationwide this year? What are the available solutions? Would love to see a watching guide or some further explanation to guide D3 hoops through best watching options.
It really feels like there's more than three platforms, but it really feels like there's becoming more and more just three platforms. Flow is gaining market share. We've seen like the OAC and the ODAC join, and the UAA is joining this year. So those are some big games that you'll have to subscribe to Flow if you're much of a national D3 fan to watch those games. Huddle's got a lot of teams. More and more teams are also going on Huddle platforms. They also have many conferences that go through the Huddle platforms, have like a WIAC network, NCAC network, MIAA network, and they'll have even apps, channels for Fire TV and Roku, so you can put that on your streaming TV if you like to watch them that way. I think it's always convenient when you have an app like that. And actually, Zach, I think my favorite platform to watch games on is still YouTube. Again, you can watch those on smart TVs or laptop. I think it has some of the best, like forward, backward. If you want to watch, like, oh, I want to see that play again, I think YouTube makes it really easy to do that. Several teams are there. It's definitely not as popular as Huddle or even Flow at this point, but there's some games on Boxcast. But yeah, I love anytime I can get like a smart TV type app and throw a game up. I love to do that, even though I do end up watching a lot on my computer and laptop as well. But that's how I kind of watch the games.
And unfortunately, increasingly, you have to just kind of learn mostly conference by conference what platform they are on.
Yeah.
As you mentioned, we're way up to like 9 on Flow Sports right now, and fortunately, we've been able to have good contacts with people at Flow Sports who've been able to make it easy on us to be able to see what we need to see, get some approval to continue doing D3 dunks highlights and stuff like that. So they've been very good working with us. But that is a barrier. It's behind a streaming service. And like you said, there are a bunch of conferences. The CCIW just launched, their network with Huddle, which is free. As far as resources, Matt, I've mentioned it several times. I go to the schedule page on d3hoops.com, and I tell you what, we've kind of seen a little bit behind the scenes how much effort goes into maintaining that. And just knowing that, I really appreciate the kind of resource that it still is. Oftentimes you can find box score links, video links, and so maybe you don't know exactly what platform a school is or a conference is on. A lot of times you can find a link right there. And, maybe that's the other trick to point out, especially during non-conference play, is generally what you're going to want to pay attention to is who is the home team and what is the platform of that school or that conference, and that's basically what's going to lead you to be able to finding that game. That's probably the best advice I can give at this point.
Yeah. I mean, I would love a centralized channel where you could use your smart TV and click through and watch every D3 game just right on there. I think the closest thing we had to that was during the NCAA tournament. I think it was a partnership with Huddle and the NCAA that they came for those early round games. They had you'd use it on your web browser or on Roku or on Fire TV, and it had all the tournament games there, and that was great. But yeah, schedule page d3hoops.com. They try to collect as many links to streaming sites as they can. There's a little V next to that's the video link, but that's a manual process for them. So if a school doesn't go in and put them in themselves, they have to go and find those. There's only so much time to do that for all 400 teams and every single day and everything, and men's and women's. But if there's a game that you want to watch, click on the home team on d3hoops.com, and then on the right side there's a like official site link for men or women. Click on, if you're watching men's basketball, click on the team name, then go to official site for men, or just official site, I think it says. That will go to their athletics page, and usually you can find streaming links there. So if the link isn't automatically there, that's the process I will find to get a streaming link for the game I want to watch.
Yeah, it can be a little convoluted sometimes, and you have to track some things down. But hey, at least it's still widely available.
Yeah.
Yeah. All right, so that wraps up the mailbag here for the week 2 show coming out of week 1. You have something you'd like for us to address? Leave a comment on this episode, on the YouTube video. Hit us up on social media, and all of that social media garbage. Got caught up in a little mass Twitter ban, but we're back there, so you can find us at D3 Datacast there, Instagram, Facebook, any and all of that social media garbage. We'd love to address whatever you have for us to address at the end of next show in that mailbag segment.
Had a fun time on opening week watching games, Zach. Good job, team.